Good afternoon once again, everybody. My name is Yewande Olubodun, and I am going to be presenting my findings on the analysis done on the survey I did on trying to understand why secondary school students fail mathematics. The background. I hate mathematics is a phrase I have heard a lot of times, especially from secondary school students. However, as a mathematics tutor, I wonder whether or not these students are willing to better their mathematics skills through additional tutoring, provided their guardians or parents are willing to pay. So yes, the topic I picked was born out of my interest as a mathematics tutor and the fact that I really want to understand why secondary school students fail mathematics, because I've heard it a lot of times. They'll tell me I hate maths, I don't like my maths teacher, things like that. But the question has been on my mind a lot of times as well, that these students complaining, are they actually willing to put in the effort when it comes to bettering their mathematical skills? So that is the background of this research. And the research question is, one, are these students willing to improve their skills, like I said earlier? And secondly, if they are willing to improve their skills, how many hours per week are they willing to devote into such intervention? And that's where the HPT thing comes in, the hypothetical purchase tax, the pricing. And for this particular research, I'll be showing you my price points later on. So for the data collection, I was able to meet with two secondary schools and I surveyed 62 students. And out of the 62 students, I had students from junior secondary school and students from senior secondary school. After the data collection, I proceeded into the data cleaning as we were exposed to in the previous training, where we made use of Google Sheets to do analysis. We did some recordings, we did some pivot table creation and the likes. So I wrote here that some recordings were done, for instance, for people who said they were willing to take in the tutorials, I recorded their yeses to 1. The people that said no became 0. Also, I had some demographic variables like the gender, age, class, and the likes. So I also did the data transformation, the data cleaning, then creating of pivot table, and all this were actually done so that I could get a precise data that would be fit to do the analysis. And then for the analysis, I used the HPT tool that was designed by Dr. T, and we were exposed to the last training to get the demand curves. And yes, so now this is the proportions table after the whole cleaning was done. If you look at the likelihood, if you look at the likelihood column here, this is where the price point is. I had price point 0, 1, 2, up to 15. And then here I have people who said yes at the different price points. Here is talking about the gender, one of the demographic variables, the gender, male, female. Here talking about class. I mentioned that I interviewed junior secondary school students and senior secondary school students. So that is what this is about. And then the age demography. Now, for the first demand curve, the one I have here, as seen here, this is the P50. It shows here, based on this analysis, on the x-axis, I have the price based on the hours per week. In the one we did before, it was Naira there because we're considering money. But here we are considering hours. you remember that I shared here that for this price point, I referred to 0 hour per week, 1 hour per week, 2 hours per week, and up to 15 hours per week. And that is what I have here on my x-axis. And then on the y-axis is talking about the percentage of the students who said yes to the different price points. And here is the first demand curve I would like to highlight. If we look at this demand curve, would realize that at this point one, this is 1 hour per week. We'll see that at point one, more than 90% of the students were willing to commit 1 hour per week into bettering their mathematical skills. If we look at point two, the same thing. If we look at here, which is point three, we'd see a slight decline. Coming to 4 hours per week, we'll see another decline. 5 hours per week, there's a decline. 6 hours per week, 7, 8, 9, 10, and even up to 15. But most importantly, for this demand curve is trying to tell us that as the hours per week increased, there is a decline in the willingness of the students to participate in tutorial classes to better their mathematical skills. And here, we would also realize that more than half of like a greater population, were actually willing to commit into the tutorial classes. You can see from here, we have a lot of people saying, yes, they are willing at 1, at 2, at 3, at 4. So generally, it shows that a lot of students are actually willing to better their mathematics skills, though they are not willing to commit a lot of hours, as seen that there is a great decline from this point. So that is one thing I want us to have in mind from this demand curve. Then moving on to the second demand curve, I analyzed this using the class demography. And when I talk about class, I mean the junior secondary school and the senior secondary school. Also, this talks about the price points, that's 0 to 15. If we look at this point, it talks about the percentage that said yes as well. So from here, the blue line talks about the junior secondary school students, and the red line speaks for the senior secondary school students. So generally, if we look at this, we'd see that these students, I mean the secondary school, senior secondary school students, they are actually willing. So we can see from here that the secondary school students, the population of the senior secondary school students, that are willing to commit hours into bettering their mathematics skills are actually more than that of the junior secondary school students. We can see it from this graph because you would realize that their own curve comes above that of the junior secondary school students. And also, when we look at the longer hours, even the secondary school students are still willing to, the senior secondary school students are still willing to commit longer number of hours into their tutorial classes to ensure that they better their mathematical skills. And one of the things I deduced from this particular demography analysis is the fact that probably because senior secondary school students will soon be writing qualifying examinations, their mind is already exposed to that fact that they actually need to better their mathematical skills, because we know that mathematics is one of the prerequisite courses they need for their qualifying examinations, at least to be able to enter into higher institutions. So I think that could be one of the reasons why a lot of them are willing to put in more time as compared to the junior secondary school students. And also because you realize that most of the senior secondary school students ideally would be more mature than the ones in the junior secondary school in the junior secondary schools. So I think that could be another contributing factor why the senior secondary school students are actually ready to devote more time when it comes to performing better in their mathematics skills than those in the junior secondary school classes. And now I also did a demand analysis based on the gender, where the male represents blue and red red represents female and blue represents male. Also, we can see the hours per week and we can see the proportion of the students who were willing to put in effort. And here, at some point, you'd see at point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, before a collision here, would realize that actually the male students, they were willing to put in more effort in the lower hours than the female students, which is a good one. At least they are willing to put in more effort than the female students at this point. But if we come here, we'd see that here there's a cross, here there's a cross, here there's a cross. And it just means that we really cannot say much because there would be interference with their choices as the time moves up. But one important thing I want us to note is at this 10 hours, if you look at this 10-hour point, would realize that the female now, and that's the red curve, the female at point 10, the females at point 11, the females at point 12, 13, 14, 15 are actually willing to put in more time than the males in bettering their mathematics skills. Although at this point, we had a lot of crosses here at this point, it was fluctuating, but we realized that at the longer hours, the female population were actually willing to put in more hours into bettering their mathematics skills. And another thing I observed from the three curves I analyzed, is that there is a decline as the hours increased. Sorry. At point 0, we had point 1, we had a lot of people. At 2, we had a lot of people. Point 3, it was reducing, it was reducing, it was reducing. And the highest price point, which is 15, was actually the least. If you look at the other one, it is the same. If you look at the third, it is the same. So it just brought me that conclusion that indeed, even though the students are willing to put in effort in bettering their mathematics skills, a lot of them are not willing to put in longer hours into their mathematics skills. And I thought about different reasons. And one of the reasons I thought about is, yes, these students actually understand that there is a problem. They know that there is a solution if their guardians and parents are willing to pay for tutorial classes. But then it is up to them to be ready to put in a lot of time and devote their time to say, yes, I really want to be better at this. Because if not, we'll just realize that their parents could pay, their guardians could pay, but if they are not willing to commit the 15 hours per week, because I thought about it, 15 hours per week, if we divide that by seven days a week, that's like 2 hours plus per week. Because mathematics has to do with a lot of practice. I don't think that 2 hours is too much for a student to put in to ensure that, okay, well, they are better at their mathematics skills. But then it shows from this analysis that they are not willing to put in longer hours. And then if the intervention would actually be considered, we should note that this 7 to 8 hours per week should actually be that optimal point we'll choose, so that the intervention, that is introducing additional tutoring, would actually be beneficial and it will yield positive fruit. And that is actually from this point where we'd see that at this P50, this is where our P50 line is, this blue dotted line. This is our P50. We would see that at 7.933333, that is where our P50 is. So if we'll be using this on the intervention, it is to tell us that the intervention of tutorial classes should not exceed 8 hours based on this particular sample size, based on this particular analysis. It should not exceed this 8-hour threshold, so that the intervention will yield positive results. And then in conclusion, also, we can see that the senior secondary school students from the class demography are willing to put in more hours, and also the female students are willing to put in more hours. And then I said one of the things to improve this could be that we could, one of the interventions could be that we counsel even junior secondary school students that they don't really have to wait till their senior secondary school years before they start preparing themselves, even for their qualifying examinations. You know, when such counselings are done, it prepares their mind early. And there is this training it gives them right from their younger years so that they don't just end up in the senior secondary school classes and then they are trying to rush and just, just model their way around their mathematics courses. So I have a side note here that says bettering mathematics skills is a collaborative journey involving students, parents, and educators. From this analysis, we'd see that yes, the students are willing, the parents are willing to pay, the guardians are willing to pay, and then for the educators, they should consider the 8 hour threshold, 7 to 8 hour threshold, so that everybody in this class, the students, the parents paying, and even the educators can actually benefit positively from this analysis. Thank you very much.